Hi, my name is Alice Na, and I'll be acting the Yellow A by Kang. As I walked into the gargoyle for my first LNYF audition in freshman year, I felt excited, but also a little more than nervous. My relationship with my Asian identity back then wasn't great. By the end of high school and beginning of college, it felt like my parents and I got into a new fight every week. They hurled racist rhetoric at me when I dated a black guy. They threatened to pull me out of WashU because they tracked my location with an app and didn't like where I was going. They fought me on getting therapy after I was diagnosed with depression, and they justified all of this by telling me that I was Americanized and claiming that they were just parenting me the Korean way. So I tried to distance myself as much as I could from my Korean heritage because the main role models I had for my culture were toxic. At the same time, I felt this visceral longing to relate to people who looked like me and shared my cultural background. I kept hearing about how I was supposed to find myself in college, so I decided to give myself one last chance to embrace my culture. I had heard from a lot of upperclassmen that LNYF was supposed to be the big Asian thing here, so I decided to bravely challenge my revulsions for Asian stuff and give it the old college try. Literally, I don't know what I expected when I got to the audition. Maybe it was a bunch of Asians immediately running up to me, embracing me, chanting, "One of us! One of us!" After which, all of my race-related anxieties would immediately fade away. Those idyllic daydreams were dashed pretty quickly, though. Everyone else who was auditioning was huddled together in small groups, eagerly catching up with each other and utterly unaware of anyone else around them. I was too afraid to go up to talk to them because they all seemed so close already. I was pretty sure a good number of the people in the clusters were other freshmen too. How have they already made so many friends? I wondered to myself, utterly confused. Was there some huge Asian only party that I missed or something? Why don't I know anyone here? I tried to be optimistic though. Once I joined an LMYF act, I'd have my own group of friends to hang out with. I just needed to be patient. So I was pretty devastated when I found out that I hadn't gotten into any of the acts I auditioned for. I guess this is a sign from the universe that you don't belong with the Asians on campus, I told myself. You just lost a huge opportunity to make Asian friends, all because you were too talentless to pass a single freaking auditions. Great going. After that, every time I tried to do something Asian, it felt like a test. I had this entirely self-imposed taking time bomb hanging over my head. You saw those freshmen at the LNYF audition. They all have Asian friends already. You better make some too before everyone else forms their friend groups without you. But the experience I had at LNYF auditions kept repeating itself. I would go to an Asian event, everyone there would already know each other, and I would quietly slink away, feeling awkward and ashamed. Eventually, I started thinking that there was just something wrong with me that made me not good enough for my own people. I had these two complexes about being Asian swirling around in my head. My hatred of my ethnicity stemming from my belief that Korean culture was toxic, and my fear that there was something wrong with me because I couldn't fit in with other Asians. I'll save you the extended psychoanalysis and just say that these complexes led to a lot of self-loathing, and that caused me to overcompensate like my life depended on it. Sometimes I would reject doing Asian things and hanging out with Asian people and gloat to myself about how I wasn't the stereotypical Asian who only had Asian friends, which was, of course, just a thinly veiled defense mechanism. Other times, I would think to myself, I'm going to force my way into the WashU Asian community one way or another, damn it, and attend a bunch of GBMs for Asian clubs to try to find my place. But the only thing I ended up forcing myself into was burnout and disillusionment as I continued to fail to cultivate those meaningful relationships with other Asian people that I secretly craved. It was during one of these brute force my way into being a real Asian phases that I managed to finally get into an LNYF act. But it wasn't the cure for my racial identity woes that I was hoping it would be. I had more Asian friends and acquaintances than I had when I started, sure, but I still felt like I was playing at being Asian. And I was afraid that even if I did feel a little more genuine Asianness as a result of joining LNYF, it would only last as long as the performance. But maybe I spoke too soon, because the night LNYF ended, I ended up meeting an Asian guy at an after party and we hit it off immediately. And against my expectations, my brain didn't scream, "Wee wee, this one's an Asian man," every time we hung out. I was just enjoying getting to know him without feeling like I had to prove myself. Could this be a sign that things were changing? The relationship I developed with this guy was undoubtedly the most Asian one I'd ever been in my life. He would bring me his mom's kimbap sometimes, and I would help him with his Korean homework, and I would feel a little less lonely every time we talked about the struggles of being Asian American. But strangely, within the context of that relationship was also the least Asian I'd ever felt. Those stressful alarm bells telling me that I had to act a certain way for other Asian people to accept me had disappeared. I started realizing through that relationship that not being exactly the same as other Asian people didn't make me less Asian than they were. And on the other hand, making friends with other Asian people or doing Asian things didn't make me a stereotype. Before I had that realization, the word Asian felt kind of like the yellow version of the scarlet letter, a huge letter A on my chest that let people, both Asian and non-Asians, make certain assumptions about me. And my racial self-reckoning, if you want to call it that, was like ripping off that yellow A. Asian wasn't a mold that I had to cram myself into by virtue of my Korean DNA anymore. It wasn't a test or a ticking time bomb either. It was just a state of being, a part of who I was. And it was a state of being I shared with other people. And for the first time, I found joy in being able to relate to them through that. After my boyfriend and I split up, I was afraid that my new, healthier ways of processing my racial identity would leave with him. But it turns out I didn't need to worry. I quickly realized that while my ex may have been the only other Asian person I was close to when we first started dating, he was far from the only one by the time we broke up. That initial close relationship I had developed with an Asian person had given me the confidence and enthusiasm I needed to form others. And the love and support that my new Asian friend showed me helped me realize that I could feel a sense of belonging within Asian communities, even if the specific people within them came and went. So, where am I now? To start, I'm honestly having a lot of fun with being what I call a born-again Asian. After avoiding doing anything too Asian for years because I associated Asianness with trauma, I'm really into K-pop and Korean food and studying Korean history now. And I'm falling in love with the culture that I'd once taken for granted as though I were experiencing it for the first time. I've also made peace for the most part with the idea that even though Asian culture has a ton of problematic elements, there's still ways that to love my culture while rejecting the bad parts. I've realized that there are other Asian American kids out there with similar stories to mine, who also reject the anti-Blackness and sex negativity and stigma against mental health of our parents' generation. And that gives me hope that things can change. I admittedly still fall into those old patterns of insecurity and overcompensation sometimes. I'll admit that my heart hurts a little whenever my friends talk about how much fun they had in LNYF during the years that I didn't get in. And when that happens, I'll sometimes fall back into those old thought patterns of, well, at least I'm not as stereotypically Asian as they are. But part of ripping off that yellow A from my chest meant that the yellow A's that I had mentally stapled onto other Asians' chests fell off at the same time as mine did. Without realizing it, I had been categorizing Asian people as either stereotypical Asians or Twinkies because I felt so insecure about my own identity. But now I know that every other Asian person's personal journey and definition of Asian are valid, no matter how stereotypical or unorthodox they are. And that includes mine. So, what is my own definition of Asian, you ask? My appearance, my work ethic, and my middle name. My painful memories of emotional abuse and of rejection. The love and solidarity I feel from my Asian friends. The tremendous amounts of community and joy that my Asianness has given me all fit into it. And the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. The complexity of it all is that being Asian isn't a bad thing, but it's not even close to being all good all the time. So I'll just say it just is. It's just me. And whatever it is, I don't want to run away from it anymore.